This story is about the life of a young man named Yamamoto, who is a college student who has a part-time job at a convenience store, and accidentally one day meets a girl named Hayashi Megumi, who is the most beautiful in their class during high school. The girl is known as the Queen because of her strong-willed and arrogant personality. Even when they were still classmates, Yamamoto could not get close to Hayashi. Their reunion that night was quite surprising for Yamamoto, especially since the young man accidentally found out Hayashi's secret that he shouldn't have known. Flashback to a few hours before the reunion, Yamamoto was still at his house and doing his favorite hobby, cleaning. Yamamoto found pleasure when he saw parts of his house become clean and shiny without dust. Cleaning had become a mandatory ritual of daily activities that Yamamoto had to do. The cleaning activity was not always popular with many people, but Yamamoto could spend hours so comfortably cleaning his environment. Even that day, he was almost late to go to his part-time job. The part-time job that Yamamoto has this time is a night shift job, because the pay received between the night and day shifts is very different. In addition, according to Yamamoto, convenience stores that are close to residential areas will not have many customers at night. Yamamoto often feels bored while on guard. He even begins to worry whether the convenience store he guards will be able to survive in the future. Suddenly a customer came and greeted him so friendly. Yamamoto was stunned for a moment because the young man recognized the voice of the customer who was standing in front of him. At first, Yamamoto wanted to deny it, but when he looked at the customer, Yamamoto was sure that the one in front of him was his old high school classmate, Hayashi Megumi. Yamamoto was very surprised by Hayashi's appearance in front of him, because he had just found out that the girl also lived in Tokyo. Hayashi made small talk and talked a little with Yamamoto like an old friend who had just met again after a long time. On the other hand, Yamamoto as his interlocutor felt something strange, because their high school graduation procession had only happened a few months ago, but the figure of Hayashi in front of him now seemed to show signs of a very big change. If it was the same Hayashi as Hayashi in high school, then Yamamoto was sure that the small talk between them would never have happened. When in school, Hayashi was a beautiful girl with many friends and was always popular, and often became the target of comps for boys. However, Hayashi showed an arrogant and unfriendly attitude towards Yamamoto. Their benches were not that far apart, so one time when Hayashi's eraser fell, Yamamoto took the initiative to pick it up, but what he got from Hayashi was not gratitude, but a sharp look as a gesture of dislike. Hayashi also often refused men who tried to have a romantic relationship with her, so that the beautiful girl held the title of the arrogant queen. Yamamoto, who remembered a glimpse of his high school memories, did not have good memories of Hayashi. Yamamoto was just trying to do his job as a cashier, but when Hayashi reached out to take his shopping, Yamamoto saw a bruise on Hayashi's wrist. Spontaneously, Yamamoto then asked what had happened to Hayashi. The girl's gesture showed a movement that seemed to cover her body. The gesture made Yamamoto realize that there was a possibility of other bruises that Hayashi had. The girl did not hide that she had bruises, and even said honestly that she got the wounds because of violence in the form of beatings carried out by her boyfriend. Hayashi also said that her lover lived at home, and they had been living together for some time. Yamamoto spontaneously commented that it was too early for Hayashi to decide to live with her lover. Hayashi's response to Yamamoto's response showed an attitude that did not like Yamamoto interfering in her life choices. Yamamoto was certainly confused by Hayashi's response. If his response hurt the girl's pride, then why did Hayashi speak honestly that the one who had hurt her was her lover? Hayashi, who had finished her business, slowly left the convenience store, while Yamamoto was still thinking about whether Hayashi had told her weakness some time ago. Yamamoto still couldn't believe that Hayashi, who was known as an arrogant queen, was at a point where she could tell her weakness easily. Seeing the girl leave made Yamamoto worried that Hayashi would come back and meet her lover, and then potentially get physically attacked again. Because of this worry, Yamamoto then invited Hayashi to stay at his house that night. Hayashi immediately gave a very negative response, and even gave Yamamoto a sharp look. The young man then did not want to be misunderstood, so he explained why he was willing to invite Hayashi to stay at his house that night. Yamamoto was even willing to spend the night at an internet cafe so that he could provide a place for Hayashi to rest alone, or at least allow Hayashi to be able to contact her parents. But the girl again gave a fact that was quite surprising to Yamamoto, that Hayashi's parents had broken off relations with the girl. The breakup between Hayashi and her parents was because the girl decided to move and live with her boyfriend. Her parents were very against Hayashi's decision at that time, so Hayashi, who remained determined, ended up not only letting go of her parents, but also dropping out of her university. Yamamoto was speechless listening to Hayashi's story just now. The young man unilaterally said that he would give Hayashi a spare key to his house and his address. But before the young man left, Hayashi refused to accept the spare key and preferred to wait for Yamamoto to finish his work. They then agreed. Yamamoto still felt strange with Hayashi's current attitude, which was very far from her attitude at school, especially when he remembered the bruise on Hayashi's wrist. After finishing work, Yamamoto and Hayashi returned to the young man's house. Yamamoto welcomed Hayashi as a guest who would stay quite well. The young man still felt unreal that Hayashi was currently in his house. Although today's incident was never planned, Yamamoto felt a little nervous even though the young man had no intentions of doing anything to Hayashi. Hayashi did not expect that she would be indebted to Yamamoto. Yamamoto did not want to think of his actions as a debt of gratitude from Hayashi to him. He just did what anyone else would do if they were in the same situation as him. Hayashi then said that what happened to her today was because her boyfriend was in a bad mood and needed to cool down. Hayashi said that her boyfriend did not always hit her, but it sometimes happened when her boyfriend's work was not going well. Not there, she felt that she needed to support her boyfriend better. The story told by Hayashi then received a comment from Yamamoto that the Hayashi he knew in high school would never say something like the Hayashi who was now in front of him. Yamamoto tried to digest Hayashi's attitude and words in his mind. From what was said about giving space to her lover and Hayashi's hope that her lover's behavior earlier was due to a bad day, Yamamoto concluded that he shouldn't have asked Hayashi to come back home. Yamamoto then told the girl that tonight she was free to stay at Yamam's house. Hayashi felt quite helped, and even returned Yamamoto's words to him about "you're saying things high school you wouldn't have said either." Hayashi then asked permission to use Yamamoto's bathroom. The young man waited for a moment until Hayashi finally came out of the bathroom after finishing with short clothes that allowed Yamamoto to see the many bruises on Hayashi's body. Yamamoto had time to comment on the wounds, but Hayashi only responded that her lover needed time to calm down for a while. However, Yamamoto was still disturbed because the wounds that appeared looked like old wounds. Yamamoto got a curt response from Hayashi. With that response, Yamamoto was convinced that he should not have gone any further to interfere, so the last response he gave to Hayashi was advice that the girl should not force herself to be with someone like her current lover. Hayashi did not like Yamamoto's response, but the young man was only giving his opinion, so whether Hayashi would follow his words or not was none of Yamamoto's business. Yamamoto still tries to advise Hayashi that her boyfriend is not good, and so far the girl has only been used. Yamamoto tries to pull Hayashi out of the vicious circle that will continue to trap her with her boyfriend's violence. However, the reaction shown by Hayashi can be seen clearly by Yamamoto, so that the young man also cannot interfere further. Hayashi chose to sleep. Yamamoto invited the girl to use his bed. Yamamoto asked Hayashi to think about his advice carefully without rushing. The young man then went to prepare to sleep on the floor because his bed was already occupied by Hayashi. Time passed, but neither Hayashi nor Yamamoto could fall asleep. Yamamoto turned his back to Hayashi, so he was quite surprised when Hayashi, who was still awake, suddenly asked him. Yamamoto was confused by Hayashi's question. The young man had difficulty interpreting what Hayashi expected them to do. Yamamoto was still silent, but Hayashi suddenly got out of bed and hugged Yamamoto from behind, so that the young man was really surprised. Yamamoto was surprised by Hayashi's sudden hug. The young man felt he had no right and needed permission to get the hug. Seeing Yamamoto's behavior made Hayashi ask if the young man he was hugging was still a virgin. Yamamoto immediately answered no, but everyone knew that Yamamoto was lying. Hayashi started teasing Yamamoto by calling him cute. Yamamoto held Hayashi's shaking hand. Hayashi once again told her lover that his behavior was not always rude, but could also be kind and considerate. His rude behavior started when they started living together. Hayashi's lover would hit her whenever he was in a bad mood, even if it was outside of work. Hayashi realized that their feelings were in turmoil. Her lover would complain about Hayashi not making money, but when Hayashi wanted to apply for a job, Hayashi instead got scolded by her lover. Hayashi realized that her story was not pleasant, so she chose to let Yamamoto sleep. However, Yamamoto responded to Hayashi's story wisely. Hayashi was surprised by Yamamoto's empathy and wanted to hear the young man's words again. However, Yamamoto was too embarrassed to repeat the sweet words, so he chose to pretend to sleep. Hayashi was still happy. It had been a long time since she received sympathy from others. Yamamoto woke up as usual to start his day. He felt quite surprised why he woke up on the floor, but when he looked at the figure next to him, he just remembered what happened last night. When he saw Hayashi's body covered in bruises, Yamamoto was even more convinced that the girl was no longer the same as before. Hayashi finally woke up and found Yamamoto almost finished cooking. The girl woke up with her body feeling sore from sleeping on the floor. Yamamoto reminded her that he had previously invited Hayashi to use his bed, but the girl refused and approached Yamamoto, who was currently cooking yakisoba. It didn't take long for Yamamoto to finish cooking, and they ended up having breakfast together. Hayashi criticized Yamamoto's manner, who still cared about his gadget while having breakfast. Hearing Hayashi's criticism made Yamamoto stop his activities with his gadget and focus on his breakfast. The girl started her first bite with a prayer, and then praised how delicious the food Yamamoto had made that morning was. When they had finished breakfast, Hayashi wanted to take the initiative to wash the dirty plates they had just used, but Yamamoto stopped her because Hayashi was currently a guest in his house. Hayashi rejected the idea and took on the task of washing the dishes as an attempt to pay for the meal she had just enjoyed. Before wetting her hands with water, Hayashi asked Yamamoto for something to tie her hair with, and in this case, all he could find was a rubber band. When Hayashi had finished washing the dishes, it was time for Yamamoto and Hayashi to have a serious discussion. Yamamoto asked Hayashi what she wanted to do in the future, but Hayashi was afraid to decide because there was a possibility that she would regret it. Yamamoto advised Hayashi to think about the problem objectively before deciding, because the young man was sure that Hayashi would not regret the decision that had been made. The girl was still hesitant because, according to her, not always a problem can be seen objectively. There is a time when emotions will take over, and at that time regret is certain to await. Yamamoto still has his belief that Hayashi will not regret her decision in the future, while Hayashi herself is still hesitant to decide. She wanted to know what really made Yamamoto so sure, and immediately, the young man answered that Hayashi did not need to worry because he would always be here. Those words made Yamamoto feel embarrassed, but he then explained that one day Hayashi might need someone else to think with, and Yamamoto could be that person. Hayashi was quite surprised at how reliable the young man now sounded. Hearing those words, Yamamoto immediately denied it by saying that he was just trying to force his opinion on Hayashi. Hayashi responded to Yamamoto by laughing. They then started discussing Hayashi's problem. Yamamoto wanted to know how the love affair had changed Hayashi that far. Hayashi told him everything. The things that Hayashi had experienced since moving to Tokyo were all told with lots of jokes here and there to lighten the mood, but that couldn't cover up how terrible the story was. Hayashi laughed and still had time to defend her lover, so that Hayashi's lover would not always be angry. Hayashi's lover also often apologized, but would still repeat the activity. Yamamoto tried to tell Hayashi that there was something called domestic violence that continued to rotate like a cycle. Starting with a feeling of regret that overflowed, then became a feeling of being emotional and offended by small things that led someone to commit violence at its peak. Hayashi was quite amazed at how Yamamoto could know so many things. Not only that, Yamamoto was also the first person Hayashi talked to about her problems. Hearing Hayashi's words made Yamamoto feel surprised because the girl previously had so many friends, but now none of them were there. Yamamoto asked where Hayashi's cell phone went, but Hayashi's answer was so amazing that her lover had once said that Hayashi didn't need a cell phone because the girl already had her lover. Hayashi's lover had destroyed the girl's cell phone, so Hayashi lost all contact with her friends. Her lover also wouldn't let Hayashi have a new cell phone, so the situation made Hayashi trapped. Hearing Hayashi's story made Yamamoto even more determined to help the girl. Initially, Yamamoto only had half-hearted intentions to help Hayashi, but with the girl's current situation, Yamamoto was determined to help Hayashi to the end, even if it would make Hayashi hate Yamamoto's actions. Hayashi still hasn't finished telling about her lover, who she said was not always physically violent towards Hayashi, but also had a good and cute attitude at certain times. Hearing how Hayashi told the story made Yamamoto quite dizzy to think of how to persuade the girl, but how surprised he was when Hayashi, with her determination, decided to break up with her lover. What Yamamoto had said managed to make Hayashi realize that all this time, she had only been used by her lover to satisfy Hayashi's possessiveness. Hayashi is excited to plan something that can make her break up with her boyfriend, but Yamamoto suddenly wants to express his opinion regarding Hayashi's boyfriend's attachment later, when their relationship has ended. Yamamoto is sure that Hayashi's boyfriend might not agree to break up with Hayashi. From this conclusion, Yamamoto submitted a proposal to Hayashi where the contents were how to make Hayashi unattractive in the eyes of her boyfriend. Hayashi is enthusiastic enough to listen to Yamamoto's story, but the first thing they have to do, according to Yamamoto, is to go to the hospital and then continue to the police station. Yamamoto invites Hayashi to report the girl's lover to the police station so that he gets a fitting punishment and cannot move freely because of the surveillance and track record of his criminal acts. Yamamoto wants Hayashi to be free from the feeling of being vigilant, but Hayashi herself does not want her lover to get punished. The girl does not want the police to get involved, even though her lover has made many mistakes. Yamamoto is confused by Hayashi's attitude, who said she was ready to leave her lover, but for Hayashi, leaving her lover and filing a charge are two different things. Yamamoto gave in and followed Hayashi's wishes, who were reluctant to involve the police. Yamamoto realized that all he could do was suggest without force, because the one who was going through it was Hayashi. Even so, Yamamoto was still willing to be a place for Hayashi to complain if at any time Hayashi was hurt again. However, Yamamoto also wanted Hayashi to be a little honest with him. Yamamoto told the girl to stay at his house for a while in exchange for not involving the police for now. Hayashi was shocked and seemed to misunderstand. Her gesture of hurriedly covering her body seemed to suggest that she thought Yamamoto was helping her to get her body. Yamamoto clarified that the reason Hayashi could not return was because Hayashi previously lived with her lover, and of course with Hayashi not returning, Yamamoto was sure that Hayashi's lover was currently looking for Hayashi like a maniac. Hayashi finally understood why Yamamoto asked her to stay at his apartment. Yamamoto then said that there was something else that Hayashi had to do even though the girl didn't like it. Yamamoto had guessed how Hayashi would respond to his words, and sure enough, Hayashi thought that the reason Yamamoto helped her was to gain access to Hayashi's body. Yamamoto was getting tired. How could Hayashi always come to that conclusion? The only reason Yamamoto could think of was because of Hayashi's spontaneous response, who was tired of being treated like an object. Yamamoto reprimanded Hayashi for not agreeing to something Hayashi didn't do. What Yamamoto wanted to tell Hayashi to do was to go to the hospital to get treatment. Hayashi could only obey Yamamoto's words, asking her to go to the hospital. After doing a medical checkup, the bruises were evenly distributed throughout Hayashi's body, even the torn ligament in the wrist. Although they finished treating Hayashi, based on what Yamamoto saw when she was in front of the doctor, Hayashi seemed to be covering up what happened to her for the sake of her boyfriend. Yamamoto didn't want to force Hayashi any further, and for now, he just wanted to focus on helping the girl. They went to shop for Hayashi's various needs such as clothes and others, all done with Yamamoto's money. Hayashi seemed to feel embarrassed, but she promised to repay Yamamoto's money that he spent on Hayashi, even though the girl herself did not know when she would be able to repay it. After shopping, they went home and rested. The next day when he woke up, Yamamoto was sure that he needed to buy a futon for her. His morning routine went as usual while Hayashi was still sleeping on his bed. Yamamoto cooked breakfast for himself and Hayashi before going to college. The young man was reluctant to wake Hayashi up because he thought she should sleep as much as Hayashi wanted. Yamamoto went to college after his housework was done, even though he honestly felt guilty for skipping his morning cleaning. Yamamoto came home carrying a new futon that he bought for him. From the front door, Yamamoto could smell the aroma of cooking from inside his apartment. When he arrived inside, he was greeted by the sight of Hayashi cooking. Hayashi asked if Yamamoto liked hamburger steak or not, but instead of answering, Yamamoto just said that Hayashi didn't need to wait for him and cook. Yamamoto could make dinner as usual after he got back. Hayashi cooked that time because she felt that it was the least she could do. Hayashi was quite good at making dishes. She then asked Yamamoto again, but the answer she got was only half-hearted. Yamamoto wanted to take a break, but he realized the oddity of where Hayashi got the ingredients that were not in his apartment before. After the food was ready, they gathered at the table and ate together. They enjoyed Hayashi's cooking that night and Yamamoto praised its delicious taste. After finishing, Hayashi also took over the responsibility of washing the dishes. As she was leaving, Yamamoto asked the girl if Hayashi had gone out today. The question came up, and Yamamoto realized in an instant that his question made him sound like a possessive lover. Honestly, that was not what Yamamoto meant. Hayashi was silent for a moment but answered curtly. Yamamoto explained that it was okay for Hayashi to follow his advice or not, but the young man reminded Hayashi that going out and risking running into Hayashi's ex was a reckless act. Hayashi immediately got angry and raised her voice while Yamamoto reacted calmly. After finishing washing the dishes, Hayashi sat down and apologized to Yamamoto. Yamamoto did not abuse Hayashi and even admitted that he was the one who caused the problem. Yamamoto felt that he should have asked Hayashi that morning instead of assuming to handle the groceries. Yamamoto thought that Hayashi would let him do it like that, but he should have waited and asked. Hayashi responded that Yamamoto did not need to apologize for that. Yamamoto turned and asked where Hayashi got the money to shop. The girl just used the rest of her money and stopped at the supermarket. She also knew that if Yamamoto knew about her actions, Yamamoto would be angry. Hayashi remembered her boyfriend who also got angry about everything. When he was in a bad mood, then Hayashi's boyfriend would find an excuse to hit her. The only quiet time for Hayashi was when her boyfriend was quiet while eating together. Because of that experience, Hayashi thought that Yamamoto would forget to scold her while eating when Hayashi made dinner for him too, just like her boyfriend did. Maybe Hayashi wouldn't get in trouble for going out of the house. Yamamoto was good at investigating what Hayashi meant. There was a reason why Hayashi didn't want Yamamoto to be angry when the girl took the risk of leaving the house. Hayashi then said honestly that she wanted to get a part-time job. Yamamoto expressed his thoughts that getting a part-time job for Hayashi right now was not a good thing to do. Hayashi was also aware of that. The reason why the girl wanted to work was so that she could earn money and not be a bother or a burden to Yamamoto. Hayashi had indeed said that she would pay Yamamoto back someday, but in just a few months the girl was sure that her living expenses would drain Yamamoto's savings. Hayashi just wanted to not be a burden to Yamamoto. Yamamoto understood what Hayashi meant, but if something happened to Hayashi, then it would be too late. Hayashi was also aware, but she had also resigned herself. If one day her lover found her, then she resigned herself. Yamamoto was surprised by Hayashi's resignation because there were many ways to avoid the risk. Yamamoto was confused about what Hayashi meant by her words. Yamamoto honestly still doesn't know what's weighing on Hayashi's mind. The girl could risk simply just by staying in his apartment after the situation has calmed down. Even Hayashi might be aware that what she's doing right now could be categorized as self-harm. Yamamoto doubts if Hayashi would do that just for Yamamoto. Hayashi gets abused both physically, emotionally, and mentally. Not only that, but also manipulation and power trips. Hayashi's relationship with her lover has not been long, but in just that short time, the strong-willed queen's personality has now changed into a very helpless person, making Yamamoto even more upset. What exactly has Hayashi's lover done to Hayashi? Yamamoto opened the banking application on his phone and showed Hayashi his financial situation. Yamamoto explained in detail that Hayashi's presence would not affect his lifestyle and finances, so the conclusion is that Hayashi does not need to work. Hayashi still feels bad because what is used is Yamamoto's money, but Yamamoto himself does not regret it. He uses the money for Hayashi willingly. Hayashi feels even worse. There is no reason for Yamamoto to use his money for Hayashi's needs, but Yamamoto remains firm in his decision. Hayashi was getting more confused and frustrated. Yamamoto had no obligation to help her, and so far Hayashi kept dragging Yamamoto into her problems. There was no reason for Yamamoto to keep Hayashi staying in his apartment. Hayashi had nothing to offer to keep her safe. From that reaction, Yamamoto was sure of his suspicions. The reason Hayashi looked for a job that she said was for Yamamoto was not like that. Maybe some of her intentions were like that, but Hayashi's main goal that she didn't realize was to take back the dignity that was taken from her. With that, Yamamoto inevitably gave one reason why Hayashi had to stay in his apartment. With Hayashi in his apartment, the housework was completed. Yamamoto did not hate housework, but with his many activities outside, Hayashi's presence doing his housework made Yamamoto breathe a sigh of relief. Yamamoto was a perfectionist. If he saw a single speck of dust on the TV, he would end up cleaning the entire room. With his busy schedule as a student and worker, Yamamoto did not have enough time. Hayashi began to understand what role Yamamoto wanted to put Hayashi in, but of course it wasn't cleaning. Cleaning was Yamamoto's hobby and had even become his life goal. If Hayashi did all the housework except cleaning, then Yamamoto could devote 100% of his time to cleaning. That was reason enough for Yamamoto to lend Hayashi money. Yamamoto thanked Hayashi for the hamburger steak he had just eaten. Hayashi was happy. The girl realized that she always ended up causing trouble for Yamamoto, but according to Yamamoto, that was the meaning of living together. Hayashi finally agreed not to look for a job. She also decided to make a bento for Yamamoto before the young man went to campus. Hayashi would also cook for their lunch so that the cost of food expenses could be efficient.
Yamamoto then appreciated Hayashi's suggestion. Another thing that Hayashi wanted to know from Yamamoto was what Yamamoto liked in terms of food. When he heard that question, Yamamoto's heart beat faster for a moment. It was recorded that Hayashi had lived with Yamamoto in the young man's apartment for 3 days. Yamamoto, who had bought a new futon yesterday, no longer felt sore after waking up. Yamamoto woke up too early, so he felt embarrassed to wake Hayashi up. Yamamoto then decided to do his hobby, which was cleaning in a place that would not wake Hayashi up, namely the bathroom. An hour had passed and Hayashi woke up. The girl greeted Yamamoto, who had almost finished cleaning the entire bathroom. Based on what Hayashi had observed, Yamamoto was someone who was used to waking up very early to start his day. This habit had been going on for quite a long time. Even Hayashi remembered that when she was in school, Yamamoto was the earliest student in his class. After the short pleasantries, Hayashi turned to prepare breakfast while Yamamoto, who was waiting, chose to watch the morning news. When Hayashi finished cooking, Yamamoto offered to bring the cooked food to the table and the plates they would use, but Hayashi refused. Yamamoto just didn't want Hayashi to force herself, but Hayashi thought that Yamamoto was bothering her enough. Hayashi ordered Yamamoto to sit and wait. Yamamoto could only obey now because Hayashi looked angry. The meal was over and Hayashi went back to washing the dishes they had eaten from. Yamamoto was about to get ready to leave and asked Hayashi for space so he could change his clothes. Hayashi didn't mind if Yamamoto changed his clothes near her, but the young man didn't want to and moved to the bathroom. Hayashi's attitude just now reminded Yamamoto that the girl had indeed lived with a man, so it was natural for Hayashi to see an undressed man. Yamamoto started to take off his clothes and was about to put them in the washing machine, but was shocked when he saw Hayashi's underwear in the washing machine. Yamamoto was even more shocked when Hayashi appeared behind him to say that Yamamoto's bento was ready. Yamamoto hurriedly put on his clothes. Hayashi was confused and asked what exactly Yamamoto was doing to scream. Yamamoto honestly said that he screamed because Hayashi suddenly flung the door open while he was undressed. Hearing that explanation made Hayashi tease Yamamoto. She asked if Yamamoto didn't like it if Hayashi saw him naked, and of course Yamamoto confirmed it. Hayashi continued to tease Yamamoto by saying that she didn't mind showing him, but Yamamoto, who was still embarrassed, chose not to respond and said goodbye to go to college. He also didn't forget to thank Hayashi for his bento. Hayashi said that in the bento, she had added Yamamoto's favorite kinpira gobo. Yamamoto thanked her again and said that he would be home late because he had work. Before he left, Yamamoto was caught taking a deep breath, showing the gesture of someone who was annoyed. Hayashi was quite surprised when she saw that. Someone like Yamamoto could also complain. It was natural because Yamamoto was still human. Hayashi smiled. The reason was that even though Yamamoto complained about his job, Yamamoto was more eager to help Hayashi. Of course, Yamamoto would do that, especially now that he knew how delicious Hayashi's cooking was. When he left his apartment, the rain stopped and it looked like the weather would get hotter. Yamamoto knew that they were in a risky situation. Yamamoto doubted if he could fix Hayashi's problem. If something happened, the impact could get worse. If time passes too long and Hayashi accidentally meets her lover, then it is likely that Hayashi's lover will be more bitter and violent than before. If that happens, then the control and abuse will only get worse. The longer they let the problem go, the harder it will be for them to get help from the police. Reporting the case immediately is the best option Yamamoto can think of, but unfortunately, the young man messed up and agreed with Hayashi that they would not go to the police station. If Yamamoto brings up the police again, then it is certain that Hayashi will just shut Yamamoto down. Yamamoto sees other options such as other people who can be Hayashi's support and give advice on how to act. One example of such a person appears in front of Yamamoto. She is Kasahara Akari, who is Hayashi's best friend in high school. Kasahara is a suitable person to talk to Hayashi, but even though Yamamoto and Kasahara went to the same university, the two never talked to each other, and Yamamoto also can't just talk and bring up the topic of Hayashi and her girlfriend, because there is a possibility that Kasahara also has contact with Hayashi's girlfriend. In this case, Yamamoto began to be confused about what he should do. Yamamoto wanted to ask for help from Kasahara. Kasahara used to be part of the top-tier clique. Kasahara was even more popular among male students than the strong-willed Hayashi. However, Yamamoto was just an ordinary student who was more often a troublemaker. Yamamoto often caused female students to cry even countless times in high school. Yamamoto has been cursed out more times than he can count to. There was no chance for a man like Yamamoto to talk normally with Kasahara. Yamamoto gave up on that plan and chose to make a new plan. Break time arrived and Yamamoto opened the bento made by Hayashi. Yamamoto was quite happy when he saw the menu that Hayashi made for him. In the end, Yamamoto could not make a new plan. That night he went home to the apartment. Hayashi greeted him and then immediately turned to heat dinner. Hayashi suggested to Yamamoto to take a shower first. Not only that, a change of clothes had also been prepared by Hayashi. Yamamoto took a bath and felt comfortable. When he finished, Hayashi greeted him with dinner that was ready to be served on the dining table. Yamamoto was amazed. That day Hayashi spoiled him. Hayashi did not understand what Yamamoto meant. The young man explained that all he did was go home and all the comforts awaited him. Hayashi was confused because what she did was Hayashi's daily life when she lived with her boyfriend. Hayashi also expressed her surprise. The girl also wanted to clean up even though Yamamoto said Hayashi didn't need to clean up, but unfortunately, Yamamoto's apartment was very clean, even free from a single dust. Yamamoto praised Hayashi, who seemed to be able to handle all domestic work. Hayashi was confused as to why Yamamoto should be surprised. The point is Yamamoto just wanted to thank Hayashi. He also reminded the girl to take it easy when she was in Yamamoto's apartment. Yamamoto reminded her that Hayashi's presence in his apartment was so that Hayashi's life would not be too hard. Hayashi didn't want Yamamoto to lecture her. According to Hayashi, Yamamoto just needed to be grateful. Yamamoto wasn't ungrateful, but the young man felt that Hayashi had done too much. He wanted Hayashi to relax when she was at his place. Hayashi stared at Yamamoto with a sharp gaze. Yamamoto began to correct his actions and asked carefully if Hayashi could do a little less around the house. Hayashi asked Yamamoto back. What if Yamamoto had someone staying at his place and asking for help with chores? Wouldn't most people just complain that the chores weren't done well enough? Yamamoto has an answer that he is sure of, which is trusting someone else with chores means accepting they won't do it your way. If you can't handle that, don't delegate the tasks in the first place. Hayashi is confused and asks if that means Yamamoto doesn't like Hayashi's food, but that's not the point. Yamamoto also feels that Hayashi's cooking suits his palate very well. Yamamoto just wanted Hayashi to take better care of herself. Dad didn't even have to wait just to eat with Yamamoto. The girl was free to eat first whenever she wanted. Hayashi refused because if she did that, then she would end up seeing Yamamoto eat later.
And eventually Hayashi would be hungry again. Hayashi honestly understood what Yamamoto said, but she still didn't want to relax too much. She felt bored when she was in Yamamoto's apartment alone. Hayashi's cell phone was broken, and she was also bored of watching television. Yamamoto then got up for a moment and looked for something. He returned to Hayashi when he had found what he was looking for. Yamamoto lent her his old tablet because he didn't use it anymore and got a new one. With that, Yamamoto told Hayashi to play and not just do housework. Hayashi laughed because usually people say the opposite. Yamamoto gave Hayashi the tablet along with the charger. The girl thanked him and would play the tablet right after washing the dishes. Yamamoto was about to take over washing the dishes, but Hayashi asked him to do something else. When finished, both were busy with their own. Yamamoto with his television and Hayashi with his tablet. Suddenly, Hayashi returned the tablet to Yamamoto for 10 minutes. Yamamoto was confused about what Hayashi meant by 10 minutes. Hayashi climbed onto the bed and buried his face in the pillow, while Yamamoto was wide-eyed when he saw the tablet display showing a collection of adult content stored by Yamamoto on the tablet. Yamamoto was very surprised. He then said that he owed Hayashi one. Yamamoto started deleting them one by one. Hayashi started teasing him by saying that it turned out Yamamoto also had a sex drive. Yamamoto asked Hayashi not to tease him, but Hayashi continued and asked what type of girl Yamamoto liked. In the morning, as usual, Yamamoto woke up early and did his cleaning ritual. Unconsciously, he made a sound when he was excitedly cleaning the stain on the window frame. The sound woke Hayashi up. Of course, anyone would wake up when they heard a scream near them. Hayashi understood Yamamoto's actions because it was natural that when people became excited there was a tendency to scream. Yamamoto felt that Hayashi's words sounded way more suggestive than they should have. Hayashi hurriedly got up and apologized for waking up late. That night she slept too late because she was playing with Yamamoto's tablet. Yamamoto was grateful that Hayashi could spend her bored time with the tablet. He was quite curious about what Hayashi watched with his tablet. Hayashi only watched simple shows, but when Yamamoto asked, Hayashi was excited to show it. Yamamoto then remembered some time ago he had been criticized by Hayashi for playing with gadgets at the dining table. But what he saw now, Hayashi also did the same thing. The video that Hayashi watched contained content about a couple who were celebrating their anniversary and chose to go to a restaurant to celebrate. However, even though the couple followed the dress code, the waiter still forbade them from entering the restaurant. They ended up going to the place where they usually go and told the chef there. It turned out that the owner of that diner was the head chef at that fancy place. The chef then scolded the waiter severely and even fired him. Watching the video made Yamamoto surprised and confused. Hayashi was very excited to hear Yamamoto's opinion, but gestures can't lie even though Yamamoto agrees with Hayashi's taste. Yamamoto never liked that kind of content. Using other people to get involved in someone's punishment just feels mean-spirited. Getting help is not wrong, but what makes Yamamoto dislike is why not make the main character fight for his justice. Stories like that feel lazy and cheap for Yamamoto. Yamamoto saw that the viewing history was full of similar stories. He was surprised again when Hayashi asked Yamamoto what he thought. The young man was silent and sweating. Seeing Yamamoto's gesture, Hayashi realized that Yamamoto didn't like it. Yamamoto was shocked and tried to deny it, giving an excuse that he liked the video. Surprisingly, Hayashi did not suspect anything and was successfully fooled. Yamamoto then reminded Hayashi to maintain her sleep pattern. Before leaving, he said goodbye and said that he had no work today so he would be home on time. On the way, Yamamoto was still thinking about Hayashi's problem. Maybe the girl wanted to punish her lover, so that feeling led Hayashi to be obsessed with the video he had just watched. If that was the case, then there was still a chance for Yamamoto to convince Hayashi and make him go to the police station. However, Yamamoto did not want Hayashi to be like the character in the video. He wanted Hayashi to take steps and solve his problems. Yamamoto also felt curious about where Hayashi's lover was now. Hayashi had been in his apartment for 4 days. There was no way Hayashi's lover didn't go looking for the girl. The sooner this problem was resolved, the better. Yamamoto began to think about talking to Kasahara. Today Yamamoto had decided to meet Kasahara, but wherever he went and looked, Yamamoto couldn't find Kasahara. They only met in French class, that do. Why he went home empty-handed? When he arrived at his apartment building, Yamamoto was shocked to see the lights in his apartment were off. The young man rushed up and checked the situation. He was worried that Hayashi had been found and taken back by his lover. Yamamoto rushed in to see the situation and hoped that Hayashi was okay. When he entered the apartment, Hayashi was seen lying on the bed soundly hurriedly. Yamamoto felt relieved immediately, knowing that Hayashi was just sleeping soundly. Yamamoto then put in the laundry that was left outside while the owner was still sleeping. With the sounds that Yamamoto made, Hayashi accidentally woke up. Hayashi got out of bed to do something without being careful. His feet stumbled over his own feet, but fortunately, Yamamoto was quick to catch Hayashi. Hayashi quickly got away because what he was going to do seemed very urgent. Hayashi grabbed the clothesline and started folding the dried clothes while facing the wall. She didn't dare to look at Yamamoto but apologized. Yamamoto said that Hayashi didn't need to get worked up like that, but the girl looked very sorry for waking up late and not doing the chores that were her job. Yamamoto didn't mind it, but Hayashi herself felt very guilty. The young man then asked what caused Hayashi to miss what she had to do. Hayashi woke up late because previously she stayed up late and ended up sleeping all day. Hayashi stayed up late playing with his tablet. Yamamoto didn't want to bother and gave a simple solution. Hayashi just needed to stop staying up late from now on. If there was a problem, they just needed to solve it. There was no point in getting stuck and blaming themselves over and over again. Hayashi felt confused. He hesitantly asked if Yamamoto wasn't angry, but Yamamoto didn't see what Hayashi had done as deserving of his anger. Yamamoto then gave Hayashi a suggestion that no one died because they messed up. He asked Hayashi if anyone died because Hayashi didn't do the chores. Of course not. That's the level of guilt they were talking about. Yamamoto wanted Hayashi to stop blaming herself so much. She would also stop sleeping so late. Hayashi thanked Yamamoto. According to him, Yamamoto has a very mature attitude. Even at some points, Yamamoto's mature attitude is quite creepy. Hayashi joked with the sentence to tease Yamamoto. Only then the words could be called impudent and could invite Yamamoto's anger. Hayashi turned to cook dinner. While cooking, the girl could feel that the life she was living now could only be called living with the person she loved. Yamamoto did not hear Hayashi's words and wanted the girl to repeat them, but Hayashi diverted her. She said that maybe she should have talked more with Yamamoto when she was in high school. Yamamoto was happy if Hayashi finally realized. They began to wonder in their minds, if they had interacted more with each other, their school days would have been better. The question did cross their minds, but regretting the past was not a Yamamoto thing. One mistake does not mean the end of everything. It did not mean they were ruined forever. They still had time and they could start over. In the middle of their dinner, Hayashi asked Yamamoto what he wanted for tomorrow, but like any other guy, Yamamoto replied that he would eat whatever she made. Hayashi was upset. The words "whatever" were the worst answer ever. Yamamoto wasn't so sure, but when Hayashi asked if his mother had never told Yamamoto, the young man thought for a moment. Yamamoto remembered that his mother had also said the same thing to Hayashi, but one thing was undeniable: anything Hayashi made was delicious. Yamamoto meant it. On the 5th day of hiding Hayashi, Yamamoto thought that Hayashi had changed a lot. He thought that maybe if Yamamoto brought up the matter of reporting Hayashi's lover again, the girl would listen to him now. If they could report Hayashi's lover's actions, they could feel safer. Yamamoto arrived at the cafeteria, but he couldn't find an empty seat for him. Many students used the empty seats for their bags. While Yamamoto was still searching, a girl's hand reached for his clothes. It was Kasahara who offered Yamamoto the empty seat next to her. Yamamoto was about to refuse, but Kasahara sincerely helped Yamamoto. The two then talked to each other. It had been a long time since they had interacted. Kasahara said that Yamamoto was avoiding Kasahara. Yamamoto replied that he wasn't avoiding her, he just didn't have a reason to talk to Kasahara. Kasahara just found out that Yamamoto was that type of person. They were silent before Yamamoto continued to say that Kasahara should also talk to him. And that was indeed what was done just now. Yamamoto thanked Kasahara for the seat. Kasahara didn't mind as long as she could be of help to Yamamoto. Yamamoto was a little uncomfortable when Kasahara kept talking in sentences that could be misinterpreted. Yamamoto then asked the point, what Kasahara wanted from him. At first, Kasahara was still playing dumb, but when Yamamoto showed that he couldn't be fooled, Kasahara directly asked if the young man still remembered Hayashi Megumi. Yamamoto was stunned, but then immediately responded. Yamamoto still remembered Hayashi as someone who was obnoxiously close and always arguing with Kasahara. Kasahara continued to ask if Yamamoto knew that Hayashi moved to Tokyo or maybe had seen him lately. Yamamoto silently observed. He wondered why Kasahara asked that, or maybe Kasahara was also looking for Hayashi's whereabouts. But the question is why? Is it possible that Hayashi's ex-lover asked Kasahara to check on Hayashi, and how the two could have met? There were so many questions that arose when Kasahara said Hayashi. Unknowingly, Yamamoto was silent for quite a while, which confused Kasahara and drew Yamamoto's focus back. When Yamamoto was about to speak, another girl appeared and greeted Kasahara. The girl was Kasahara's friend who was called Irie. The two talked for a while and Kasahara introduced Yamamoto as her boyfriend. Of course, Yamamoto immediately reacted that Kasahara had a weird sense of humor. Seeing Yamamoto made Irie realize that she had seen Yamamoto in French class. Yamamoto in Irie's mind was a man who always aces the quizzes. Yamamoto did not deny it because it was true. Irie then took Yamamoto's hand and coaxed him to teach Irie sometime. Yamamoto felt Irie's excessive touch on him. Kasahara spoke up that Irie's actions today would not work. Kasahara explained that Yamamoto had another class to attend. Yamamoto was very surprised by how Kasahara knew his class schedule. Irie had no choice but to give in. The girl turned to Yamamoto's lunchbox, which looked very homey bento. When asked if Yamamoto made it himself, the young man could not answer for sure because it was Hayashi's. Yamamoto couldn't say that Hayashi made the bento. If he told the truth, his words could be another dead end that day. If only he could be sure that Kasahara wasn't a threat, then things might be different. Yamamoto then fell silent and wondered why he didn't just ask Hayashi about how Hayashi and his ex-lover met, and whether Kasahara was also involved with them. When he arrived at his apartment, Yamamoto was greeted by Hayashi, who was cooking. However, when Yamamoto was close, Hayashi immediately changed her response and came to Yamamoto. She asked if Yamamoto had met a girl earlier. Yamamoto was silent because he was not sure. Yamamoto was confused as to why Hayashi asked him that. In his mind, maybe it was just because Hayashi smelled the remaining scent of Kasahara and Irie's perfume that was still attached to Yamamoto. Hayashi was convinced that she was right. Yamamoto confirmed that he met girls and what the problem was. Hayashi got angry and asked back why Yamamoto went to meet the girls. Yamamoto was confused about how to respond. He then asked why Hayashi acted as if Yamamoto had done something wrong. There was nothing wrong for Yamamoto to meet anyone because Yamamoto and Hayashi were not in a romantic relationship or anything. Hayashi began to feel down. She realized that she was just a stranger to Yamamoto, and she had no right to care about which girl he met. Hayashi was frustrated and took it out on Yamamoto. She shouted that she was sure that whoever Yamamoto chose would be someone much better, smarter, sweeter, and so on compared to Hayashi. Yamamoto heard, but he was confused about what exactly made Hayashi explode in anger. Hayashi continued his words. She thought that they were strange. It didn't make sense. Why would she live there when they weren't a couple, cooking for Yamamoto, staying in his apartment even when they didn't come? Yamamoto was silent. He knew that Hayashi had misunderstood and concluded unilaterally. He tried to talk, but Hayashi didn't want to continue. Hayashi, with his anger overflowing, left Yamamoto's apartment.